No one has told you this, but I'll say it right off the bat. You're not losing to the world. You're losing to weaknesses that you yourself feed. And until you destroy those internal flaws, nothing will change. Not motivation, not technique, not promises. The internal game is brutal. Either you dominate yourself, or you will be dominated. And today, here, you will discover exactly where you are sabotaging yourself. And worse, you will realize that you thought you were strong, when in fact you were just comfortable. It may hurt to hear this, but someone needs to tell you. Your repeated failures do not come from a lack of ability. They come from a lack of courage to eliminate what is dragging you down. You waste your strength fighting consequences while ignoring the root cause. That is self-cruelty. And the scariest part? You don't even realize you're doing it. But today everything changes. Today you will look inward with a sincerity that no one in your circle has ever had the courage to demand of you. And here's a truth that many people can't bear. You're not stuck because life is hard. You're stuck because you're allowing yourself to be weak at critical points. Small habits, small choices, small distractions, they all turn into chains. Chains that prevent you from accessing the strong version of yourself that you should already be. And that's why this audiobook isn't just content, it's confrontation. Confrontation with what you try to hide from yourself. During this video, you will walk alongside Lucas, an ordinary man, broken, insecure, full of mental addictions, just like you once were or still are. But Lucas did something that 99% of people will never have the courage to do. He destroyed his own weaknesses, one by one, without mercy, without excuse. And when you realize what happened to him, you will feel the weight of everything you could have become, but still haven't allowed yourself to be. So here's your final warning. This audiobook was not made to motivate you. It was made to transform you, to disturb you, to turn you inside out, to force you to look in the mirror without filters, without emotional makeup, without comforting lies. If you continue watching, you will not leave the same. You will not return to the old pattern, because when you destroy your weaknesses, you awaken a force so profound that even the world must adapt to you. Ready to begin? He always believed that strength was a matter of accumulation, more skills, more strategies, more techniques. However, while studying Musashi's journey, he realized that true mental toughness comes from the opposite, elimination. It's almost ironic. The less internal noise, the more power you carry. Like an ancient mentor, Musashi seems to whisper that winning doesn't depend on carrying weight, but on letting go of what slows you down. And in this brutal simplicity, a new identity shift begins to take place. He observes that Musashi didn't try to be better than others. He tried to be less vulnerable than he was yesterday. This change in perspective creates a profound form of self-discipline because it replaces the search for motivation with the search for clarity. When a person stops gathering tools and starts discarding distractions, the path opens up. It's almost like sharpening a sword. You don't add metal, you remove excess. And in this process, the first sign of a true warrior mindset emerges. Upon understanding this, he begins to see how modern society does everything backwards. People want apps, hacks, shortcuts, planners, and 1,000 different techniques. But Musashi won more than 60 duels without losing a single one. And he didn't use any of that, just presence and elimination. His inner mentor realizes that power lies in removing what weakens, not in adding what embellishes. And when this realization hits, a sense of relentless consistency begins to emerge almost naturally. It's as if the spirit of the samurai awakens in small daily actions. He also understands that eliminating does not mean impoverishing life, but rather liberating it. It's like tidying up a very messy room. You don't need new decor. You need to remove the clutter. The same goes for the mind, body, and routine. A person with few excesses thinks better, acts better, and feels better. And Musashi knew this before modern science talked about clean cognition. This simple practice is the beginning of true mental toughness. To apply this in practical life, he starts small, eliminating distractions before trying to increase focus. For example, instead of looking for advanced productivity techniques, he uninstalls 3 useless apps that only drained his energy. He also reduces the time spent with negative people, not out of arrogance, but out of strategy. He realizes that eliminating noise allows self-discipline to flourish effortlessly, and that gives him the feeling that the warrior mindset is built of invisible bricks. He discovers that eliminating also means facing the discomfort of letting go. It seems simple to stop scrolling through your feed, but it's almost like a mini internal duel. It is in this duel that the identity shift develops, because each renunciation builds a new self, more aligned with strength and purpose. Musashi trained only with what was necessary, and the simpler the training, the stronger the warrior. He begins to understand that simplicity is an extreme form of power, and power doesn't have to be loud. Observing this pattern, he realizes that most people lose internal battles because they carry too much baggage. These are old beliefs, inherited fears, outdated habits, repetitive thoughts. Musashi would call them broken weapons, which must be discarded immediately. This internal cleansing frees up energy for what really matters. And from this renewed energy, true relentless consistency is born, which only exists when the path is clear. To make the process more tangible, he creates a daily ritual of elimination. Every day he asks himself, what is weakening my strength today? Sometimes it's a habit, sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a thought. By removing just one element per day, he creates a powerful cumulative effect. This practice strengthens his mental toughness in a way that no amount of motivation can, and this quiet discipline becomes almost spiritual. He recalls that Musashi carried two swords, but in his mind he carried only what was necessary. This inspires him to separate life into two parts, weapons and dead weight. Weapons are habits that propel you forward. Dead weight are habits that drain you. This simple distinction creates direction, and direction creates focus, and focus creates self-discipline. It's a chain of effects that transforms anyone who truly commits to it. He realizes that eliminating weaknesses is much more strategic than trying to increase strengths. It seems counterintuitive, but it makes perfect sense. You don't have to be the fastest. You just have to avoid stumbling. That's why Musashi said that winning was a consequence of not losing. When he reduces his vulnerabilities, his confidence skyrockets. And that quiet confidence is what forms the backbone of the warrior mindset, a silent but real force. He begins to practice this in everyday situations. For example, instead of trying to be more productive, he decides to just stop opening the refrigerator for no reason. It seems silly, but this microcontrol strengthens his identity shift. At another time, he eliminates the habit of responding to messages right away, which immediately gives him more peace of mind. These are small adjustments, but they add up to a more aligned life, and alignment creates power. He also realizes that eliminating does not mean living less, but living better. People with many distractions live in constant noise, always tired, always late, always lost. Those who eliminate excess become more present, clearer, more consistent. This clarity creates the perfect environment for relentless consistency to be born. Because no one needs motivation when life is clean. Clarity itself drives action. He learns to call this negative force, the force that arises when you remove what gets in the way, not when you add something new. This philosophy reminds him of Japanese monks who shaved their heads not for aesthetics, but for lightness. The fewer things to take care of, the more energy is left for what matters. And that is pure mental toughness, the kind that grows quietly. No glamour, no stage, no medal. In practical exercises, he creates a monthly elimination list. Habits, objects, commitments, and even ideas that no longer make sense. It's like maintaining a sword, removing rust, removing chips, cleaning the edges. He realizes that this clears his mind more than any advanced technique. And clarity is fuel for self-discipline. When the mind is clear, the body follows suit. He also understands something profound. Each elimination is an act of courage. Letting go of something that no longer serves us is scary, even when we know it's good for us. But it is precisely this discomfort that strengthens the warrior mindset. The person who eliminates develops humility because they have to admit that something was wrong. And this humility is the fertile ground where true inner strength is born. And as he eliminates weaknesses, he discovers something curious. The challenges become lighter, not because the world has changed, but because they have changed. This is the essence of identity shift, transforming oneself into someone who does not carry unnecessary weight. Gradually, without realizing it, they approach the life of Lucas, who will appear shortly thereafter, showing that invincible strength is not theoretical, it is lived. And that is where a new chapter begins to unfold. Lucas never imagined that his journey would resemble that of an ancient samurai. He was an ordinary guy, one of those who wake up tired, live stressed, and always say, "I'll start on Monday." But one day he realized that his entire life was being built on well-packaged excuses. It was at that moment that the seed of self-discipline sprouted almost without meaning to. The turnaround started small, but with the strength of a true warrior mindset. He realized that he didn't need perfection. He needed presence. In the beginning, he tried to train only when everything was aligned. Good weather, good mood, good energy. The result? He never did anything. When he understood that true mental toughness is born precisely on bad days, something inside him changed. It was his first real identity shift, one of those that begins silently. And that change paved the way for a relentless consistency he had never experienced before. On a rainy day, tired and irritated, Lucas decided to try something different. He did 20 push-ups on the living room floor, without music, without motivation, without glamour. And in that simplicity, he felt something strangely powerful. It wasn't physical strength, it was inner strength. The strength of someone who acts even when they don't feel like it. This attitude became a milestone in the construction of his warrior mindset. And as he repeated this, he realized he was getting mentally stronger. Over time, Lucas developed a rule. If I don't want to do it, that's exactly what I need to do. That phrase became his mantra. Instead of running away from discomfort, he threw himself into it, like a beginner learning to swim in the cold sea. And that was precisely what built his mental toughness, one layer after another. He began to notice that the more discomfort he sought, the more comfortable he became with life. And that transformed him profoundly. To facilitate the process, Lucas began to adapt his routine. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment to train, he trained anywhere. In the bathroom at work, in the garage, in the hallway of the building, sometimes in the backyard, while waiting for his coffee to brew. This raw simplicity awakened an unexpected, relentless consistency within him. Training went from being an obligation to an identity. And this identity shift changed absolutely everything. Something curious began to happen. People started to notice. A coworker would ask, "Man, why are you doing push-ups during your break?" Lucas would laugh and reply, "Because my excuse doesn't pay my goals." This light humor masked a profound truth. He no longer depended on motivation. He depended on choice. And repeated choices create self-discipline faster than any self-help book. Speaking of books, Lucas decided to dive into deeper learning. He started reading The Power of Habit, Anti-Fragile, and even Think and Grow Rich. Not to feel smart, but to mentally consolidate what he was practicing physically. He realized that by combining reading with action, his mental toughness doubled. And each insight further strengthened his new warrior mindset. On his worst days, when his mind tried to sabotage him, Lucas did exactly the opposite of what his body wanted. If he was angry, he trained. If he was tired, he trained slowly, but he trained. If he was sad, he took a deep breath and did even if it was just 5 push-ups. This behavior was living proof of his identity shift. A man who acts when he doesn't want to is on the verge of frightening strength. Musashi would be proud. He learned that consistency doesn't come from motivation. It comes from micro-decisions. That choice not to hit snooze. That decision to get off the couch when your mind says later. This sum of small acts builds a relentless consistency that seems invisible in the short term, but transforms life in the long term. Lucas began to trust himself more precisely because he achieved these small, invisible victories. One day, Lucas had a cold, his body was aching, and he had zero energy. Any normal person would have given up, but he looked in the mirror and said, "If I don't do it today, I'm training my mind to give up." So he did just 10 push-ups, but they were the 10 most important of his life, because they strengthened his mental toughness, much more than 100 push-ups on good days. It was about character, not performance. Over time, Lucas realized that every excuse has a voice, a soft, intelligent, convincing voice. He began to identify this voice as an internal enemy. And every day he fought a little duel with it, just as Musashi did. Each time he overcame the negative dialogue, his warrior mindset expanded a little more. These silent duels were shaping a different man. He understood that nothing changes if you don't change your identity. His actions were only sustainable because he decided to become someone new. Someone committed to self-discipline, even when no one is watching. That is the true identity shift. It's not about wanting a new life, but about becoming someone new enough to deserve it. Lucas was becoming one of those rare men. With this new vision, he began to notice patterns. Every time he overcame an excuse, he gained energy. Every time he gave in, he lost energy. It was as if the mind had an invisible tank. He realized that consistency feeds this tank, and laziness empties it. This simple metaphor helped Lucas build lasting, relentless consistency, and it caused his efforts to begin to bear deeper fruit. He also realized that by training anywhere, he was training something beyond his body. He was training adaptability, resilience, invisible strength, the kind of strength that real life really demands. That is the essence of mental toughness. There is no glamour, no stage, no applause. It's just him, the floor, and a commitment to who he is becoming. And that transformation paves the way for something even greater. As his story evolves, Lucas begins to discover that physical and mental strength are not separate things. They are layers of the same warrior. With each untimely push-up, with each small sacrifice, he digs deeper within himself. And in this process, without realizing it, he approaches a much older and more powerful concept, the movable mind, which will be the basis for the next step. Lucas always thought that controlling his mind meant feeling nothing. He thought that being strong meant becoming a rock, but he quickly discovered that this doesn't work. True mental toughness is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to remain stable while everything around you tries to drag you down. When he understood this, he felt as if a new door had been opened inside him, a door to a kind of strength that makes no noise. And there began his next identity shift. He began to notice how his mind reacted to every little thing. An ignored message became a source of anxiety. A contrary opinion took his focus away for half an hour. And that's where Musashi's teaching about the still mind made sense. Lucas understood that it was not about not feeling, but about not moving internally in response to the stimulus. This ability to remain centered strengthens self-discipline in a quiet but powerful way. To train this, Lucas adopted a simple exercise, observing. He did not try to control his thoughts. He just stayed there, perceiving his mind as if he were watching clouds moving. Some were heavy, others were fast, but none deserved his immediate reaction. This detachment was the beginning of true mental toughness. He realized that the more he observed, the less he was dragged away. And the less he was dragged away, the stronger he became. Sometimes at work, someone would make a comment that would have irritated him before. Now, he would take a deep breath and let the emotion pass, like water flowing down a river. This simple training began to unlock a refined type of warrior mindset, the kind that doesn't react on impulse, but by choice. He realized that controlling the mind was like controlling a sword. Lack of control hurts you first, and that awareness changed everything. Lucas also realized that much of the suffering comes from creating stories in your head. He found himself imagining scenarios that never happened. What if it goes wrong? What if they don't like me? These questions drained his energy, weakened his consistency, and sabotaged his routine. When he began to notice this, he laughed to himself. He was a professional screenwriter of imaginary tragedies. From this awareness, he began to cultivate relentless consistency in the form of presence. To strengthen his immovable mind, Lucas began meditating for just 3 minutes a day. Nothing big, nothing mystical, just him sitting and breathing. And those 3 minutes gave him more clarity than an hour of endless scrolling on his phone. He realized that meditation was not a grand ritual. It was mental hygiene. Just as he brushes his teeth, he cleans his mind. And this cleansing strengthened his self-discipline almost automatically. He also created a practical method. Every time a negative thought arose, he asked, "Is this fact or imagination?" Surprisingly, 90% of his worries were pure imagination. This little question became a technique, a sharp sword against internal chaos. And the more he used this technique, the more his warrior mindset solidified. It was like training the mind to remain still even in the face of an emotional earthquake. One day, Lucas received a message that would have destroyed his mood before. Something misinterpreted, poorly worded. He felt his stomach churn, as usual, but he did the exercise. He observed. He breathed. He waited. He didn't react. And he realized that his natural reaction was no longer as violent as before. This was living proof of the evolution of his mental toughness. The still mind was becoming his new nature. He understood that an immovable mind is not a stagnant mind. It is a mind that knows where it is, even when the world tries to pull it in all directions. This generates an inner confidence that is difficult to explain in words. It is the kind of confidence that does not need applause or validation. A silent but firm confidence. And this firmness is the basis of the true identity shift he was experiencing. To develop this further, Lucas started walking without headphones. Just him, the air, and the sounds around him. At first, it was strange, almost uncomfortable. But he quickly realized that this silence reinforced his emotional stability. It was like talking to himself without interruptions. And this simple daily walk strengthened his relentless consistency, because he learned to be with himself without running away. He also trained himself to respond slowly. Before, he reacted too quickly. He got angry quickly, anxious quickly, impulsive quickly. Now, he waited a few seconds before acting. This minimal pause made a huge difference. It was enough to prevent his emotions from taking over. And this self-control is the essence of self-discipline. It's not glamour, it's technique. Over time, his still mind began to change his physical posture as well. He noticed that his breathing became longer, his shoulders more relaxed, his face less tense. It was as if his body was learning from his mind not to move internally. This body-mind alignment is one of the silent pillars of mental toughness. He was becoming a calm warrior. Lucas realized that when you don't react to everything, you choose what really deserves your energy. This transforms your day, your routine, your life. A still mind is not coldness. It is pure emotional intelligence. It is understanding that nothing external has the power to control your center. And when the center is firm, a warrior mindset is born that is so stable that it frightens those who do not know the strength. One day, when facing a family problem, Lucas applied everything he had been training. Instead of panicking, he remained quiet. He observed. He breathed. He thought. And only then did he act. This attitude completely changed the outcome. He realized that a still mind is not an unattainable state, but a daily practice, a continuous repetition that strengthens relentless consistency and shapes your identity. And so, with this growing stability, Lucas began to realize that his mental strength was taking root deeper than he had imagined. Because when the mind remains calm, the body follows. And when the body follows, life changes. This new silent foundation prepared him for the next level of the journey, where mental strength meets physical strength in an even more powerful way. Lucas began to understand that mental strength and physical strength never go separately. It's like two blades of the same warrior. One sharpens the other. He realized that by training his body, he was also training his mind, and vice versa. This silent connection shaped his mental toughness in a way that motivational speeches could never achieve. And so he immersed himself in the concept of Seini no I, the true path of the warrior, a path where action is worth more than intention. He decided to commit to something simple, yet brutal, 100 push-ups a day. It wasn't about aesthetics, it was about soul, about proving to himself that he was capable of keeping his word. The first sets were a complete disaster, but that's exactly why they were necessary. Each repetition brought him closer to his identity shift, that silent process where the old man dies and the new one takes shape. And this metamorphosis began to change him. In the early days, Lucas tried to negotiate with himself. Just 50 today. I'll make up for it tomorrow. But every time he gave in, he felt he had betrayed his own trust. That hurt more than any muscle pain. He then understood that self-discipline does not negotiate. Either you comply, or you become someone who does not comply. This raw awareness ignited within him the rarest kind of inner strength, the strength that does not accept embellished excuses. This brought him closer to the true warrior mindset. Over time, he began to notice small victories. The push-ups became smoother, his breathing more coordinated, his mind more stable. It was as if physical practice was adjusting his internal structure. Training daily created a kind of relentless consistency, and this quiet consistency began to influence other areas of his life. He was becoming more reliable, even to himself, and that is extremely powerful. Lucas noticed that something very curious was happening. By training his body, he was training his discomfort. With every little pain, every burn, he learned to say, "Keep going." That simple word became one of the greatest weapons of his mental toughness. When his body wanted to stop, he kept going a little longer. And it was precisely in that little longer that his identity was transformed. His mind began to trust his body, and his body began to trust his mind. To keep up the pace, Lucas decided to create rituals. He would wake up, drink water, and do his sets. Sometimes he would divide them into smaller blocks during the day. Sometimes he did everything at once. It didn't matter, the commitment was the same. He understood that self-discipline is built more on rituals than on motivation. Motivation comes and goes, ritual stays. And that's how he began to create a lifestyle, not just a temporary habit. He also realized that the body doesn't lie. If you want to know how you feel inside, observe how your body reacts to effort, pain, and fatigue. Lucas saw that the more he trained, the less he complained about life. This silent change is a hallmark of the true warrior mindset. The person stops complaining and starts acting. He understood that every drop of sweat was a sentence written in his new identity, an identity built with real choice. Musashi said that the body must be able to act without hesitation. And Lucas began to experience this. When he needed to do something difficult during the day, he no longer thought twice. He just did it. The habit of facing discomfort in training began to spill over into his life. This reinforced his mental toughness because he stopped running away from situations. This readiness gave him a calm and powerful confidence. Something interesting began to happen at work. Before, difficult tasks made him anxious. Now, he took a deep breath and faced them as if they were extra training. This simple analogy helped him act quickly, without being paralyzed by fear. Over the weeks, he began to be seen as someone reliable, someone who gets things done. This reputation is a natural consequence of relentless consistency. Consistency makes noise, even when you don't notice it. To deepen his practice, Lucas studied more about samurai and ancient warriors. He read about Musashi, about Benkei, about Bushido, not for romanticization, but for strategy. He realized that all these warriors had one thing in common. They lived with brutal clarity of purpose. Nothing was done at random, and that reignited his self-discipline. He wanted to live with that same inner clarity. One of the biggest lessons came when Lucas understood that action generates clarity. He always thought he needed clarity to act, but he realized it was the other way around. He tested, made mistakes, got it right, learned, and clarity came later. This is one of the secrets of the warrior mindset. Act first, think later. Not impulsively, but in a focused way. Each action becomes a learning step. Sometimes, after training, Lucas would sit on the floor, panting, and laugh to himself. He laughed because he was feeling something he had never felt before. True pride. Not the superficial pride of posting something on social media, but the intimate pride of someone who knows they are creating something great inside. This feeling further strengthened his identity shift, which was already in full swing. He was becoming a more solid man. As the days went by, Lucas noticed that even his posture began to change. His shoulders were more open, his chest firmer, his gaze more direct. It was as if his body was reflecting the new internal software. Each repetition shaped both his mind and body. This integration is the backbone of true mental toughness, a strength that grows from the inside out, a strength that remains there even when no one is watching. And as his journey progressed, Lucas understood that this simple commitment, 100 push-ups a day, was shaping not only his physical endurance, but his philosophy of life. He was learning to carry his own world with strength and dignity. And this foundation would inevitably lead him to another profound samurai principle: permanent awareness after action, which was about to become his next step. Lucas discovered that finishing an action does not mean finishing learning. He realized this when he completed a difficult series of push-ups and, instead of relaxing, decided to remain conscious for a few seconds. That short interval broadened his perception. He understood that Zanshin, permanent awareness, is not about doing, but about remaining awake after doing. This mental vigilance strengthens his mental toughness in a rare way. It's like keeping your sword raised even after the strike. He began to realize that in life, people have a habit of turning off their minds as soon as they finish something. They close a cycle and erase it. But Lucas understood that it is precisely in that space between the end and rest that true refinement happens. That's when you assimilate, observe, understand. This practice fueled his self-discipline because it made each experience richer, and it transformed each simple act into a conscious act, worthy of a warrior mindset. Over time, Lucas began to apply Zanshin to his daily activities. Finished a workout, he observed how his body reacted. Ended a difficult conversation, he reflected on how his mind behaved. Completed a project at work, he analyzed what could have been more efficient. This active reflection was a form of relentless consistency, because it turned any experience into mental training. He was becoming someone capable of seeing details he had previously ignored. One day, as he closed the door to his house, he automatically noticed that he was attentive to the sound of the key, the feeling in his hand, the weight of his backpack. Nothing mystical, just presence. And the more he trained this state, the more focused he became. It was as if his mind was always one step ahead, noticing nuances that most people miss. This refined sensitivity is part of the silent construction of the identity shift he was experiencing. He also began to notice how Zanshin reduces silly mistakes. Before, he was always forgetting his wallet, dropping things, bumping into objects. Now, with this heightened awareness, he began to move with greater precision. His body followed his still mind, and together they created a pattern of constant attention. This is mental toughness applied to everyday life, a strength that cannot be seen, but can be felt. And Lucas was becoming a master at perceiving it. To test his awareness, Lucas created many challenges. For example, when climbing stairs, he kept his attention on his breathing and the movement of his feet. When washing dishes, he focused on the sound of the water and the texture of the dishes. These simple exercises trained his presence in a profound way. It wasn't about being a perfectionist. It was about being awake. And this awakening naturally fueled his self-discipline, because being conscious makes it easier to act with intention. He realized that Zanshin also improves relationships. Before, in conversations, Lucas would already be thinking about his response while the other person was still speaking. With his new awareness, he began to truly listen. Every word, every pause, every expression. This made him more empathetic, more present, more reliable. This presence is an essential part of the warrior mindset, because the true warrior not only masters external battles, but also the internal battles of the ego. Zanshin also began to change his notion of time. The days no longer seemed so rushed. Even with his busy routine, he felt as if each moment had more space. This feeling of expansion is a clear sign of mental evolution. A conscious mind lives slowly on the inside, even when the body needs to be fast. This reinforces your relentless consistency, as presence generates stability. One of the most memorable moments happened during a training session. After finishing a heavy set, Lucas kept his gaze steady for a few seconds, feeling each beat of his heart. He realized he was alive in a different way, not just biologically, but mentally awake. This state of hyper-awareness connected him with the spirit of the ancient warriors. And it is in this state that the identity shift becomes most evident. At work, Zanshin became his superpower. While his colleagues were exhausted, distracted, and anxious, he remained stable. Not because he was smarter, but because he was more present. He focused on only one task at a time, finished it with attention, and moved on to the next. This practice eliminated mistakes, accelerated results, and increased quality. It was self-discipline applied in its most elegant form. He also realized that permanent awareness reduces reactivity. Small problems no longer affected him deeply. He observed before acting. That interval of seconds, almost imperceptible, changed everything. It was the space where emotion lost strength and action gained direction. This internal mastery is the essence of mental toughness, responding, not reacting. And Lucas was getting better and better at it. With Zanchin, even his walks changed. Before, he walked on autopilot. Now he felt every step, every sensation in his feet, every sound around him, every change in temperature. This perception shaped his relationship with time and with his own body. It created an intimate connection with himself, strengthening his relentless consistency. Because being mindful makes any habit easier to maintain. He began to see Zanchin as a form of meditation in motion. It wasn't about stopping life to meditate, but about meditating while living, being present when washing his face, opening the window, sitting in a chair. This practice kept his mind aligned, even on busy days. And this emotional stability is what sustains the warrior mindset in the long run. With this continuous practice, Lucas realized he was becoming lighter, more confident, more centered. Permanent awareness did not make him tense, quite the contrary. It eliminated distractions and strengthened his focus. The more aware he became, the more his actions improved. And this quiet improvement prepared him to face external storms with frightening calm. And so, the practice of Zanchin made room for an even deeper strength, the ability to remain unshaken even in the face of great loss. Lucas was about to enter a phase that would brutally test his mind, spirit, and identity. And this is where Musashi's next philosophy would come into play. When Lucas was fired, most people expected him to despair. After all, losing your job is like taking a direct blow to the chest. But to his own surprise, his mind remained steady. He felt the impact, of course, but he didn't collapse. It was at that moment that he realized his mental training was working. This state of inner steadiness was the true spirit of Fashion, the mind that does not move, the true foundation of mental toughness. He left the building with the cardboard box in his hands, but not with his identity destroyed. Before, he would have felt panic, shame, anxiety. Now there was only presence. It wasn't coldness, it was emotional maturity. He knew that his self-discipline was not conditioned by his job, but rather by what he did on a daily basis. His routine, his practices, his rituals, and that clarity prevented his mind from being swept away by the chaos of the moment. Lucas felt that losing his job did not define him. It did not affect his value or his ability. It was just a circumstance, not a sentence. This simple distinction is what differentiates those who sink from those who rise. He had worked so hard on his identity shift that he no longer saw himself as an employee, but as a capable man. This internal change protected him. That's what Fashion is, deep roots, regardless of the storm. One of the most memorable moments happened when he got home and sat on his bed. Instead of complaining, he took a deep breath. He put his hand on his chest and felt his own rhythm. He was calm, strangely calm, as if he had found an inner space where no external situation could penetrate. That space was his warrior mindset, firm, centered, silent. And realizing this gave him a quiet confidence. He knew he needed to act, but he acted slowly, consciously. He opened his computer, updated his resume, organized his schedule. There was no rush, there was direction. This attitude is rare in a world where everyone panics at the slightest sign of uncertainty. Lucas realized that his relentless consistency was speaking louder than his momentary emotions. He was reaping what he had sown for months. That same day, he did his 100 push-ups, not because he was motivated, but because it was his commitment. And it was during those push-ups that he understood something profound. Those who maintain discipline when everything falls apart are unbeatable. It is in this type of action that true mental toughness manifests itself. A body that trains even on difficult days carries a mind that does not bow down to life. He remembered Musashi, who said that a warrior must be like a mountain, immovable in purpose, even when the wind tries to knock him down. Lucas began to feel this spirit within himself. The mountain does not react, it remains. And remaining is a superpower. This superpower is born from daily practice, presence, and repetition. It is the sum of everything he had built up to that point. Even after being fired, Lucas decided to maintain his morning routine. Wake up early, drink water, train, study. This continuity protected his mind. He understood that a well-established routine is like a shield. It prevents external chaos from invading his inner world. And this shield reinforces his self-discipline, creating stability even in times of uncertainty. A true warrior does not abandon his path. When he told his friends about his dismissal, he realized that they were more desperate than he was. This made him realize how much he had evolved. He was not denying reality. He was mastering his response to it. This difference is at the core of the warrior mindset. Reality can hurt, but it does not have to destroy. The person who chooses how to react comes closer to emotional freedom. Instead of sinking into negative thoughts, Lucas did something simple. He went for a walk. He walked for 30 minutes, without headphones, just listening to his breathing, feeling the wind on his face. This walk was therapeutic. He realized he was still whole, totally whole, and that wholeness reinforced his identity shift, reminding him that his strength came from within, not from a badge. He also found calm in simple tasks. Washing dishes, tidying his room, organizing papers. Each action brought order to something inside him. He realized that when the world is messy, tidying up the microcosm is a way to restore control. This control is not about rigidity, but about direction. And direction creates relentless consistency, even on turbulent days. During a quiet night, sitting on the porch, Lucas realized the depth of what he was experiencing. He had lost his job, but he had not lost himself. That is the real victory. Fashion does not prevent storms, but it prevents them from taking away your peace. He felt a new strength emerging, a strength that is born when you don't move internally, even when the world collapses externally. To keep his mind steady, Lucas made a list of rebuilding actions. Small things: sending resumes, studying an hour a day, training, reviewing expenses, meditating. Nothing grand, just simple actions, repeated with honesty. And that simplicity created a sense of control. This is how mental toughness solidifies, in small steps taken with awareness. He realized that by facing his dismissal calmly, he was training something much greater than resilience. He was training confidence. Confidence in his own ability to adapt. Confidence in his self-discipline. Confidence in his newly constructed identity. This quiet confidence began to touch deeper layers of his mind. And so, with firm roots and a stable mind, Lucas realized he was ready to see life from an even more strategic philosophy, a principle that Musashi held as one of the pillars of true mastery, something that is not about winning, but about avoiding losing. And this is where the next chapter begins. When Lucas studied Musashi's philosophy of emptiness, his mind almost froze. What do you mean? Fight not to lose, not to win. It seemed totally counterintuitive, but as he reflected on it, he understood the depth of the teaching. Musashi wasn't looking to shine. He was looking to have no weaknesses. It was a strategy based on eliminating vulnerabilities, and that resonated directly with his journey of mental toughness, which had been taking shape for months. Lucas realized that life doesn't require you to be extraordinary all the time. It requires you to be reliable. That's when he understood the essence of the strategy of emptiness. He didn't need to be the fastest, the strongest, or the smartest. He just needed to be someone who was difficult to defeat. And someone who is difficult to defeat is someone who has no exposed weaknesses. This realization reignited his self-discipline, because it completely changed the focus of his effort. To apply this in practice, Lucas began to map out his weaknesses, not his personality flaws, but his vulnerable behaviors. For example, sleeping late, skipping meals, using his cell phone early in the morning, ignoring important emotions. Each of these points was an open door to future defeats. He understood that closing these doors created a silent strength, an invisible foundation for his warrior mindset. He realized that many people try to win by starting with big things, big goals, big projects, big commitments. But the true master begins by eliminating micro-failures. What good is having gigantic ambition if you lose to the snooze button? Upon realizing this, Lucas smiled wryly. He himself was an expert at losing to small things. That's when he decided to fight what really mattered, the small gaps. One of the first changes was simple. Keep his cell phone away from his bed. An almost childish attitude, but extremely strategic. He understood that protecting the beginning of the day is one of the purest forms of relentless consistency. When you wake up focused, you protect your momentum. This protection creates a cycle of stable results. And stable results create internal confidence, a confidence that sustains the identity shift he was experiencing. Lucas also started taking care of the basics: hydration, sleep, simple food, minimal organization. He realized that it wasn't about being perfect, but about not being defeated by the obvious. The strategy of emptiness taught him that life destroys those who neglect themselves first. By strengthening these pillars, he felt his energy improve. His mind became clearer. His body became more willing. And these small adjustments strengthened his mental toughness without brutal effort. Another aspect of emptiness is not wasting energy. Lucas realized that he spent too much energy on useless arguments, social media, and anticipatory anxiety. And all of that drained his real strength. To correct this, he started using a simple rule: if it doesn't move my life forward, I don't move my energy toward it. This rule protected him. It created space. It created focus. It created the perfect environment for the warrior mindset to grow. He also started making more strategic choices. Instead of trying to do everything, he prioritized the essentials. He called this his personal mini Bushido: 3 priorities per day, no more. This simplicity increased his productivity and reduced his stress. He realized that fewer tasks done well are worth more than many tasks done poorly. And this practice consistently solidified his self-discipline. A striking point was when he realized that emptiness is not absence, it is space. Mental, emotional, and physical space. He had always tried to fill his life with stimuli: TV shows, music, social media, chores. Now, he was learning to leave space, to leave silence, to leave calm. And in that space, answers emerged that were previously suffocated by noise. This silence was part of the evolution of his identity shift. With the emptiness strategy, Lucas began to avoid comparisons. He understood that competing against others creates noise, takes away focus, and opens loopholes. External competitions feed the ego, and ego creates vulnerability. Zanshin had already laid the foundation, but now he solidified the learning. The only real enemy is the weak version of himself. This perception fueled his mental toughness, making his evolution inevitable. He also discovered that emptiness protects the emotional. Instead of absorbing other people's problems, he filtered them, not out of coldness, but out of wisdom. He understood that he couldn't carry the whole world. Carrying what is his is already enough of a challenge. This emotional selection strengthened him. It created autonomy. It created peace. And peace is a secret weapon within the warrior mindset. In his training, he began to apply the strategy of emptiness literally. He did the repetitions not to show off, but to avoid weakening. Not to appear, but to avoid regressing. This change of intention reinforced his relentless consistency. The results came naturally: strength, aesthetics, endurance. But these results were now a consequence, not a goal. Even his failures became strategic. When he made a mistake, he didn't blame himself. He analyzed the gap, adjusted, and moved on. This eliminated unnecessary guilt and expanded learning. He understood that remorse wastes energy. Adjustment builds. This approach made him increasingly difficult to defeat, just as Musashi wanted. And this attitude deeply strengthened his self-discipline. In a moment of deep reflection, Lucas realized that he had stopped fighting to prove something. Now he was just fighting not to lose to himself. This shift in focus is one of the most powerful transformations anyone can experience, because it takes away weight. It takes away anxiety. It takes away ego. It leaves only clarity. And clarity creates a new kind of silent strength. And so, as he consolidated this new way of seeing life, Lucas began to touch on something even deeper: the ability to abandon his own ego. The practice that would follow would require courage, vulnerability, and a rare emotional maturity. He was about to enter one of the most spiritual stages of the warrior's path. Lucas always believed that his value came from his results. When he did something right, he felt powerful. When he made a mistake, he destroyed himself inside. But when he learned about the principle of Sudami, he began to see life in a different light. He understood that true freedom comes when you let go of your attachment to your own ego. And this detachment does not mean losing your identity. It means gaining lightness. Lightness that strengthens your mental toughness in a way he never imagined. His ego always told him, "You need to prove something." And every time he tried to prove it, he became anxious, competitive, insecure. His ego pushed him to compare himself to others and left him vulnerable. But Sudami taught him that a warrior does not fight for validation. He fights for practice. He acts because acting is part of his nature. This change awakens a rare form of self-discipline, one that needs no witnesses. The discipline that exists even when no one is looking. With this detachment, Lucas began to realize that his failures do not define him. They only instruct him. He no longer avoided making mistakes. He avoided letting mistakes shape his identity. This created enormous emotional protection. Suddenly, criticism hurt less. Rejection no longer crushed his spirit. This emotional resilience is the basis of true identity shift because it transforms one's very relationship with life. He began to face challenges with more lightness. Instead of thinking, "Will I be able to do it?" he thought, "Let's see what I learned today." This simple change reduced his anxiety by more than 70%. He understood that while the ego is in a hurry, learning requires patience, and that patience fueled a solid strength within him, a strength typical of those who live a mature and conscious warrior mindset. When he trained, he no longer sought performance, he sought dedication. What mattered was being there, present, whole. The aesthetics of the body became just a consequence. The real training took place inside the mind, when he did one more repetition without caring who would see him. Each repetition, without ego, strengthened his relentless consistency. It was as if he were training his soul, not just his muscles. He also realized that the ego is an energy thief, always demanding approval, recognition, superiority. This constant demand left him tired, tense, irritated. When he applied Sudami, he freed himself from this internal pressure. He stopped trying to impress and started acting with integrity. This change released an incredible amount of energy for his growth, energy that fueled his mental toughness, now more focused and stable. Life began to get easier when he understood that he didn't have to be perfect. He discovered that vulnerability is not weakness, it is authenticity. By embracing his limitations without shame, he began to evolve faster. Without his ego getting in the way, learning flowed. This accelerated his identity shift because he stopped defining himself by labels and started defining himself by practice, consistency, and presence. In his relationships, Lucas began to listen more and talk less. Before, he tried to be right. Now, he tried to understand. This completely changed his communication. People opened up more to him. They trusted him more. Detachment from the ego brought a calm that spread throughout the environment. He realized that the smaller the ego, the greater the human connection. And this connection refined his social warrior mindset, the art of being with people without losing himself. One of the great challenges came when someone humiliated him in a conversation. Before, he would have responded immediately, inflamed. This time, he just breathed. He observed his internal reaction and let it pass. Not out of cowardice, but out of self-control. He realized that his ego wanted to win, but he wanted peace. This conscious choice is evidence of emotional self-discipline, one of the most advanced forms of inner strength. Lucas also learned to laugh at himself. Before, any mistake seemed shameful to him. Now, he saw humor in his humanity. This light-hearted humor broke down internal barriers. When you can laugh at your stumbles, no external attack has any power. It's like being emotionally armored, and that armor is part of the profound evolution of your mental toughness. In his personal reconstruction work, Lucas realized that Sudami also means letting go of what no longer makes sense, and that includes old identities. The insecure Lucas, the Lucas who compares himself, the Lucas who needs to be seen. He let these characters die. Each detachment made room for his identity shift to flourish even more. He was being reborn in layers. In his physical training, Sudami appeared when he gave himself over completely to the movement. No thinking about the result, the future, or aesthetics. It was just him, the floor, and his breathing. This surrender created a powerful meditative state. He realized that when the ego gets out of the way, the body finds its own rhythm. This fluid state fueled his relentless consistency, because the process became pleasurable. Tsutomu also taught him that true courage is not acting without fear. It is acting without depending on the outcome. Lucas applied this idea by sending out resumes, studying new areas, and going into interviews with the curious spirit. He no longer needed to win, just to learn, and this attitude took the weight off his shoulders. This lightness is typical of those who live a solid and detached warrior mindset. He discovered that the ego wants control, but wisdom wants movement. And the more he let go of the need to control everything, the more his life flowed. It was as if the universe was saying, "Now that you've stopped squeezing everything so tightly, I can finally help you." This feeling amplified his inner confidence, a confidence based on presence, not external approval. And so, by abandoning the ego, Lucas was about to access the highest stage of Musashi's philosophy, the one where being and doing become one, the moment when practice ceases to be effort and becomes identity. And it is at this point that the frightening level of mastery that few in the world can achieve will emerge. Lucas realized that something extraordinary was happening. What had once been an effort was now becoming natural. The discipline that had once seemed burdensome now flowed with ease. He no longer needed to convince himself to train, study, or stay present. It was now part of who he was. This rare state is the heart of Kenzen Ichi, when action and identity become one. And this fusion elevated his mental toughness to a level he never imagined he could reach. He began to notice that he no longer said, "I need to do," but rather, "I do." This simple change in words represented a huge transformation. His behavior no longer depended on motivation, emotion, or circumstance. It sprang directly from his identity, built up over months. What had once been a struggle became second nature. This is the pinnacle of self-discipline. When you don't force yourself, you simply are. At this stage, Lucas felt he was living a profound truth. You don't become disciplined, you become discipline. And this state changes everything. The effort disappears. Internal resistance diminishes. Mental friction evaporates. He realized that the secret was not to become stronger, but to remove what was preventing him from acting naturally. This clarity fueled his warrior mindset in a quiet and elegant way. Over time, Lucas began to perform difficult tasks as naturally as brushing his teeth. Reading daily, training consistently, organizing his routine, meditating. All of this became the norm, not the exception. He no longer celebrated small victories, because they were no longer extraordinary. They were just part of his flow. And that flow reinforced his relentless consistency, now automatic and stable. He noticed that people started commenting, "You've changed. You're different. You're more confident." But to him, it all just seemed natural. The internal transformation became so profound that the new behaviors ceased to be practices and became instincts. This is what Musashi called silent mastery, a mastery that does not need to be announced, just lived. And this experience solidified his identity shift completely. In training, Lucas no longer counted repetitions. He just felt the movement. He no longer thought, "I have so much left to do." He thought, "I am here." Each repetition was a moment of connection between mind and body. This state of total presence created an almost meditative feeling. He realized that the more natural the training became, the more enjoyable it was. This sustained pleasure is one of the purest forms of mental toughness. In difficult situations, Lucas no longer needed to think about what to do. He just did it. This quick response was not impulsiveness, it was mastery. The mind no longer needed to argue with the body. The mind gave direction, the body obeyed. And both worked in unison. This synchronicity is at the heart of the warrior mindset, where the right action arises without hesitation. When he woke up, Lucas no longer fought with himself. His body got up almost automatically. He realized he was living in a state of non-resistance. He did not resist effort, discomfort, cold, or laziness. He just did what was necessary. And this state reduced mental exhaustion dramatically. It was like switching from an old car to a quiet and efficient engine. This refined functioning sustained his relentless consistency. He understood that true freedom is not in doing what you want, but in doing what you need to do naturally. Many people think that freedom is the absence of rules. Lucas learned that freedom is the absence of internal resistance. When he accepted what was necessary, he stopped suffering. This acceptance shaped his self-discipline on a deep and stable level. On his journey, Lucas also realized that identity and practice are like two gears. When you just practice without changing your identity, you get tired. When you try to change your identity without practice, you get frustrated. But when you practice what you believe and believe in what you practice, everything falls into place. This fit creates a state of constant flow. And this flow is the last layer of his identity shift. During a walk, he realized how different his life was. External noise no longer determined his internal state. He was the center, a stable, firm, silent center. He understood that Kenzen-ichi is not about being better than anyone else. It's about aligning your being with your doing. This profound simplicity strengthened his mental toughness in an almost spiritual way. The people around him did not understand how he maintained such difficult habits. But the truth is that, for Lucas, they were no longer difficult. They were just part of his existence. He lived that way naturally. And naturalness is the end point of disciplined practice. This stage is the most frightening of all because it creates an unpredictable warrior. He does not depend on motivation. He depends on identity. He realized that, at this level, consistency is not forced. It is inevitable. The person who becomes what they practice no longer needs reminders, alarms, or promises. They do it because that is who they are. Lucas began to feel this in his body, mind, and spirit. This complete unity created a silent power within him, a power that even he had difficulty explaining. In times of difficulty, he no longer sought courage. He sought alignment. He realized that when his identity and his actions were aligned, any challenge became smaller. This internal fusion eliminated doubt, fear, and hesitation. It was as if he had finally found a center. This center sustained his warrior mindset in any situation. And so, reaching this elevated state where practice and identity became one, Lucas found himself ready to end his journey. Not in the sense of finishing, but in the sense of integrating it. He was about to open the final cycle of this experience, the synthesis of everything, where the warrior looks back, recognizes his evolution, and prepares to continue growing.